But thank you all for coming and attending and participating in this last webinar we have. This webinar, this is the last of a 3-webinar series that we've done over the last few weeks. The first one was a focus on music design for shows. The second one was a focus on visual design. And then this last webinar is going to be a focus on culture and team management. So I'm going to pass this time over to Cory. I'm going to give him a chance to introduce himself and maybe a little bit about his involvement in the past, and I'll let him jump into presenting. So Cory, take it away, please.
Thanks, TJ. Hello, everyone. To those of you that I know or know me, hello again, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you that don't, my name is Cory Oliver. I have been involved in the color guard activity for the last 20 years or so. Most of my time was spent in kind of 2 organizations. I was with American Fork High School for about 15 years, and I spent 12 years with Wasatch Independent, 10 of those being the director. So a long career in a kind of 2 very focused places. My performing career, I marched drum corps back when I was young enough to do so. I was a Blue Devil, so cringe if you may, cheer if you may. I know there's mixed opinions there. And then I marched the Pride of Cincinnati Winter Guard for a season in 2012 to kind of cap off my marching career before I went full head on into the director world. Early in the 2010s, I spent about 4 years on the UCGC board of directors as well, kind of doing the same job TJ's doing now, which is education specialist and offering clinics and webinars and training materials and documentation. So really excited to share some of my experience with you here. As we go through this presentation, you'll see that the slides in front of you are going to be very simple. They're more of an outline of what we'll talk about today. And I will pause between each slide for any questions, conversation, or comments, or just pieces if you want to learn a little bit more about my thoughts and takes on some of the stuff we're going to go through. Overall, I'll go ahead and dive on in. Overall, really, the way that I approach building a team involves these 3 components that you see here on the slide now: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I call this my map because that makes it really easy to remember, right? And I find that if I am able to offer my group, my team, or I've used some of these similar methods with my corporate life as well. I manage a team of about 35 people. I find that when I incorporate the MAP process, that I find my teammates or my colleagues are more fulfilled, they're harder working, they're happier to be around, and then they interact with each other in a much more impactful and meaningful way. So we'll go ahead and just dive right in. To kind of kick things off, we'll start here with just the contents. We're going to go through 4 slides. I have a lot more information than just the 4 lines you see here we'll dive into. But the kind of overall, we'll start with building your foundation, kind of how to start your season and kick off your team, and moving into creating meaningful experiences. It'll be our second section. Number 3 will be consistency is key. And number 4 will be building upon your foundation. Okay, so going into section 1, really I'm going to talk about kind of two sections or 2 ways that you can build your foundation that I found. I know it's kind of simple to only do 2, but really these are ways that defining my organization under these 2 things allow the members to kind of run with a lot and generate a lot that takes things off of my plate as it relates to culture, right? You are not fully responsible for the culture of your organization. You're just the one driving the bus. So number 1, defining clear expectations and boundaries. First and foremost, obviously, this is going to be done in your contracts, right? You either your school policy dictates what your contract has, or if you're in an independent organization, it may be that you have a board of directors that helps dictate your contract as well. It's important because this is the agreement that your student is going to make with your organization. So rely on your school policy to help guide you. Seek guidance from your administration when necessary, or if you have questions of what you can do in a contract that may be additional to school policy. I know a lot of organizations will have higher GPA requirements to participate. grades that need to stay in a certain place, attendance to their regular school curriculum as well. So seek that guidance from your administration when needed. If you're in the independent space and you're making these kind of choices, seek counsel, true counsel. Find yourself a pro bono attorney who's willing to look over that contract for you, and reach out to the network of other directors, right? There's a huge world of color guard these days. It is not, when I graduated high school here in Utah, there were 19 teams in the state. I think we're something like 75 or 80 teams here now, 20 years later. So that growth hasn't just happened here in Utah, that's happened to the entire nation. And so you can just imagine how many independent groups there are out there for independent directors to consult with and to reference other contracts. Number 2 in this section, I really think it's important as you've got your contract that lays, the black and white, here's the laws of the land for participating in our group. There's also a piece that you've got to be able to lay additional boundaries and expectations for yourself, right? You as the coach, it's your program. These students are going to interact with you, and every single coach in the world is different in the way they coach. So it's important that in addition to your contract, you outline your personal expectations for their rehearsal etiquette and their behavior and the way they interact with leadership and coaches and each other. So, if you have personal things that you need to lay out early, need to lay out for your students, like attendance policies, or you expect them to dress a certain way. An example for me, I always tell my members I need them to show up showered and fed. I don't want them to be stinky. They've got to be presentable in their ready to go, hair and face, they've showered and they're awake. They've got energy because they've got food in their bellies before they show up. So kind of like my personal things, I'm not going to put, make sure you eat breakfast before rehearsal in the contract. But that's something that I feel I need to say early on so that it's not reactive later. The reason I think it's so important to lay your personal expectations out at the beginning, oftentimes in my experience, if I haven't laid some of those things out, right? Another example, how do students behave when they're on a water break while you're working with one section of your group? Maybe the flags need some time on the floor and you have to send your weapons away. How do they behave over there on the side of the floor? That's one of my personal pet peeves. If they're all just sitting on their butt and talking like crazy, or they're distracting the group that's working, I'll get frustrated pretty quickly. So that's something I have to lay out really early on. And the reason I think it's important is because when you don't lay out your expectations from the beginning, and then maybe this scenario comes up and you react to it in a certain way, now it appears like you're reacting to something rather than the students have violated an expectation. And so laying out those expectations early allows you the foundation to enforce your expectations later on, and get actual response from your membership. When it's reactionary and you haven't laid that expectation, the students may not take it near as seriously, nor will they make the corrections needed as seriously. Number 3 in this section, so we've got our contracts, we have make your personal expectations clear, and number 3 is verbal reinforcement of your expectations. So that applies to the contract, that applies to rules you outline as a coach, and that applies to things that your staff have asked of the membership as well. So I kind of wrote my note here. If you expect a behavior or a rule to be followed, say it. If you need them to do a specific thing, say it. If you need them to stop doing something or never do something again, say it, and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. One of the most important things is that every time you see something, if I've got kids on the side of the floor talking while I'm working with the flags, I have to say something. I can't just dismiss it. So that verbal reinforcement and the consistency there will help you build upon that foundation and really guide your membership into a behavioral set that is conducive to, operating well, efficiently in rehearsal, having good rehearsal etiquette, and in the long term, more personal growth, team fulfillment, and competitive success. Any questions on defining your clear expectations or boundaries before I jump into the little things? And hopefully I think TJ might be managing the chat. Just double check here. Cool, nothing there yet. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move into my next section here. Oh, How would they treat each other? How they treat each other be verbal expectation? Absolutely. I think it's really important that if you have specific, do's and don'ts in the way that your team interacts with each other, that you express those as well. I typically do this on my first rehearsal day, right? I dedicate some time for contract and I read through the whole thing and get them to turn those in, as well as my verbal expectations as I outline how things should go. And I'll point out some of those here in a little bit when we do the little things add up, because some of the expectation reinforcement comes with the little things add up. But absolutely, I think you should express to your students how to treat each other with kindness, respect, and how they should interact with their student leadership. Sorry, I may jump to your question here. Elliot, how early would you state those specific instances? Is it when you send the weapons away that you tell them how to act on break? So Elliot, that's a great question. I try to really list these things out prior to my season. And I try to have that first rehearsal really be where I lay some of the foundation of these expectations. Granted, that comes with years of experience where I know what I expect and what I want. If you're a newer coach and you're just in your first couple of years, start to list out the things that you do expect, and then have those prepared for your first rehearsal so your students are very aware from day one what is expected of them. Okay, jumping into the little things add up. So I think this is really important because it is part of building your foundation. It's a little less behavioral, but definitely much more of a contributor to culture. The little things. And what I mean by the little things is all of the things that make your organization special for your members. Some examples that I have from my experience: we did things like team meals, team songs, gestures or handshakes or chants. Like if you get your team in a circle and you have a chanting call or whatever that is. Time together. So for my teams, what I'll do is I put them in a circle and they do the little cross hold hands thing, and they spend time with just the membership, no staff in there, just the team, where they get to talk to each other, encourage each other. I have them do this every single time they do a run through. So they circle before they perform, they circle before they rehearse the performance, and they really have some togetherness time. To circle back a little bit on team meals, team songs, gestures, and chants, I'm just going to kind of list them and then I'll go into each one. I broke myself up there and focus. So team meals, team songs, gestures and chants, together time, personalized team gear is an important one, customized or tailored uniforms when possible, social media highlights, awards and recognition, team parties and experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and give some examples. And just to kind of put a pin right here really quickly, I will share my long form document as well as the slide with you guys so that you don't have to write all these million notes if you need everything I'm saying. I will absolutely share these documents with TJ and in the Discord for you guys. So you'll have the details of these lists and things. So backing up,
touch base real quick.
Sure.
We're still on the building your foundation slide. Have we moved on from that slide?
Nope, we're talking about the little things add up here.
Just
so kind of this section B. These little things. So team meals. One of the things that I did kind of mid in my career, middle of the time with Wasatch, is I brought in, and I'll be honest, the reason we brought it in was out of necessity, not out of creativity. But we brought in every single weekend that we rehearsed, we would do a team snack or team breakfast where, for 20, 30 minutes, they go eat in the middle of rehearsal. In part, like I said, it was born out of necessity. Wasatch was rehearsing long hours and we had added Sundays, and it was, long enough rehearsals that we needed to feed them in between, but not long enough to give them a full hour meal break to go somewhere. So we started having the students bring in and rotate, who's each weekend bringing in snack. It's like if you think about Little League sports, how they have team moms who bring in snack at the end of games or snacks at the end of practices. We kind of took that mentality and applied it to the membership because they were adults. But I think as an example, you could absolutely have team parents come in and bring snacks more often, get the team spending time together. Who doesn't love their social time while eating with their friends? Team songs. I find that it's pretty important to maintain a consistent playlist throughout my color guard season. For one, students tend to attach to music like crazy. So there will be specific things in your playlist. And I apply these to dance class. I apply these to across the floors. We listen to these when we're just listening to, we need a background playlist of music. And then we also have a team song. So at Wasatch, that was a song called The Great Escape by Pink. And it was really about not letting your friends, harm themselves or be alone when they're sad. It was really about always bringing you back into the fold when you're feeling alone. And I thought that that was really important at the time we selected it. And it took hold. The members loved the song, and they carried it for years and years, and it became almost a tradition and an integral part of being a member at Wasatch. So music can enrich your students' experience so much, but I would encourage consistency in that music. Pick a single playlist of 10 to 12 songs for your whole year and use those all the time. Don't just throw on your Spotify, or I almost said Shopify, your Spotify or your iTunes music and just shuffle music. Gestures, chants, and handshakes. I love that when I go to a show, my students just kind of do this on their own. I'm sure that some of yours do as well, where they develop their own little things that happen right before the show. They got, little handshakes and gestures they do in pairs and trios and small groups of friends, or maybe your rifle line comes together and they do a little rifle thing that gets them hyped up before the show. In addition, I did for years, and I kind of inherited this as the director. It was something that was part of the organization before me. We had a team chant that we would do. We circle up, we go all hands in the middle, and we give the Wasatch chant right before we perform. I've found, there's a lot of independent guards and high school guards that have their own thing like that. And I think that's one of those moments of just bringing everybody back to unity right before they go out on the floor. Time together. That was that circle, right? I always think it's important to get the kids together before they perform to remind them to bring their brains back together. Most programs go into like water break or a 10-minute break before the run through or something, right? Where you may allow them a moment to bring in distractions or to let down their guard as it relates to focusing on the show. And that circle moment is a moment to bring them back together, not only from a team standpoint of encouraging and supporting each other there, and maybe overcoming some of the fears they have within their show, but it also brings back that sense of focus because they're all about to attend to the same task. The next two are a little bit more challenging because there are limitations to an organization's ability to offer these. But I put personalized team gear and customized or tailored uniforms. The reason I think that these are so important is because they have everything to do with how your students will feel when they're in public, right? When we go to shows, you'll see teams in fancy warm-ups and fancy hoodies and all that, and ridiculously expensive custom tailored uniforms. That's not doable for everybody. I can absolutely understand and respect the limitations that finances offer. Trust me, as an independent director, often that was either going to be, we got to fundraise it, or I personally have to pay for it. So neither option seemed fun, but there are ways to get around it. It's not easy work to fundraise, but it's absolutely doable. Personalized team gear. I say personalized because I think everybody feels even better. We've all gotten swag from somewhere, a shirt from a job, or maybe something from your color guard experience. But when you put someone's name on it, it makes a different impact because now it says this team has claimed me versus I'm just part of a group. I claim the team. It speaks that message that the team has claimed me back and gives a sense of belonging because your name is on a team jacket, right? Everybody knows you're part of this team. You're part of what makes the foundation of that team. And so personalizing your gear, whether you're going to spend $150 on warm-ups or $25 on a jacket because that's what your organization can afford, personalizing it and spending the extra $4 to embroider is worth every single penny every time. Customized or tailored uniforms. Now, this one's tricky, right? Because everybody feels a little bit different about the aesthetics of uniforms. Everybody has different taste. Everybody has an opinion on what looks good on the floor. But what I mean when I say customized or tailored uniforms, what I'm really getting at here is that you want to ensure that every one of your members, male, female, somewhere in between, big, small, somewhere in between, short, tall, somewhere in between, doesn't matter. You want to make sure that they all feel confident in what they wear when they go out in public. Okay. It breaks my heart when I go to a show and I can see that there are performers, especially the young performers at a very impressionable social age, who are going out there in a uniform that may be much too tight, or it's a little bit too see-through so you can see their undergarments. I can just imagine the courage it took them to come out, but also the self-consciousness they may feel wearing something like that. Having been through the whole I'm a boy in color guard thing back in the early 2000s, where there were, I think, 2 or 3 of us in the whole circuit, just being thrown in a uniform that was like, well, we have a boy now, so I guess put him in a button up and some slacks. That mentality or that idea made me feel kind of secondhand or not thought of as much as the ladies on my team. Now, that's one unique scenario because I'm a boy in color guard, but there are a lot of unique people in color guard, and we need to make sure we're taking care of all of them and their comfort levels. So tailored uniforms in some way. And if you can't put your entire team in the same thing because your body types are just too different, that you can't make, a tiny little thing and one of your larger performers both feel comfortable in the same thing, then just don't put them in the same thing. I think it's crucial that as directors, when we make creative choices, that we put our ego and our desires for it aside. They are always secondary to the membership experience. And sometimes that means you don't get to do exactly what you want with the uniform because it's more important your performers feel confident. So I just went through a list of a whole bunch of little tiny things, right? And these are just things that I've done. There's absolutely more ideas out there in the world. There's, I'm sure, things you do for your teams. But I do find that the more of these little special traditions you can bring and insert and manufacture for your organization, the more your students will A, engage with you and each other, but B, they will buy in. They will start to be part of the process. They will want to achieve your goals for the program because they're part of the entire mission. So the little things really do add up in creating your culture so that your membership experience is top notch. When they just come and all they do is they come to practice and then they leave practice and then they come to practice and they leave practice. And that's the whole mission. What's their purpose here? So backing back up to my mastery, autonomy, and purpose, culture building things like this that drive your membership to buy in are, they're huge to laying a successful foundation, because that buy-in is how we get everybody on the same page. I'm realizing now it is 10:30 and I am still on slide 1, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker. But before I move on, do you guys have any questions about building your foundation? Give it like 2 seconds for somebody to hit enter. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to slide 2 here. So slide 2, what we're talking about now is creating meaningful experiences. This is the stuff that feels good, right? So being a part of something larger. I think it's so important to teach my students that being part of something larger is impactful. They are part of an organization. They are part of a show. They are part of a circuit. They are part of a unique niche activity. There are many ways you can frame being part of something larger. And I think the first time you go to a color guard show as a performer and you see how big it is, and there's all the other teams and sparkles and all the fun, that's when it hits you a little bit. And for those of you that have ever gone on to the national gig and gone to WGI events, you feel it again when you go to those. And I think it's really important for development of our youth, especially, to feel that part of something bigger, right? In the world we live in today, it's so crucial we teach our youth how to work together when we live in a world so divided. Swag, baby, swag. the more things you can put on them, jackets and t-shirts and hats and socks and whatever it is you can think of, duffel bags, it makes them feel special. It makes them feel larger than life. They take all this stuff home, and now they're at home, and maybe they've got friends that don't do color guard, and they're looking at them going, wow, you get all this cool stuff. There are ways to do swag cheap, right? You can buy yourself a nice little, I bought a pressing iron thing for like $200, and I ended up making all of our own swag. I did it for like $400. Everybody got t-shirts, everybody got sweats. It was so much cheaper because we just decided to manufacture our own gear in-house. It's a lot more work, but you also have parent organizations, right? And if there's a thing or two I know about our lovely Utah parents, they're some crafty, creative people. So involve them. They will happily make you some swag. An example of this, I watched, my husband coached at Lehigh High School for a couple of years, and 2 or 3 years ago, before they were going to WGI their first time, I went over there to the school one day to watch a run through and check things out and kind of see them off. And it was like a mom factory in there. They had an entire room of moms who were just crafting away, making all of the things, socks and duffel bags and little cute cards and t-shirts. And let me tell you what, I don't know if you've seen the Lehigh kids, but they are buy-in Lehigh. They are proud of their organization, and they're proud to wear their gear. And I think in part it's because their director made a big effort to make them feel special and make sure they were branded with their logos. If you're, and then I put in here on here, I'll just read through it. But if your program is able, spend a little more on your uniforms, right? So this creating meaningful interactions and relationships. When your student doesn't feel comfortable or confident in their uniform, they are not going to reach outside of their box. They're not going to step outside of their comfort zone because they're already there. Okay. What we want is for them to go into shows feeling confident, so that then it's really easy to step outside of your comfort zone and interact with other organizations, be proud of what you're presenting when you go. So I included the uniform piece, both in adding up the little things as well as creating your meaningful interactions. I think when they don't have that confidence, you've cut them off from the ability to create these meaningful interactions in public. Confidence, right? So that goes right into the swag and uniforms. The next pieces are a little more behavioral, but this is something that I've just done because I think kindness is the key to the world getting better and being better. My notes will say when you read this, spread the love, show kindness to your students and others. The more you demonstrate patience, kindness, love, and genuine interest in your students' safety and growth within the activity, the more your students will trust your ability to instruct them, and then they will return the efforts for that growth. Teach your students that same kindness. So not only do you have to share that kindness yourself, you have to teach that to your students. Smooth over internal fights. Don't dismiss them. Help them out. Help them understand why the conflict between teammates, whether it's on the floor or off the floor drama, you have to show some of these younger performers why that's harmful for a team, right? In the work world, if you're in a corporate environment, those conflicts between individuals can create lack of work and lack of productivity and projects not getting completed. When we apply that to color guard, all of a sudden projects not getting completed, things not getting done, that sounds a whole lot like not getting the competitive result you want and not having the individual performances your team members want to have. Okay. And it comes from these little things like student fights, right? That kindness is key. Teaching your veterans and your leadership. Don't be mean to rookies because they're bad at color guard. Be helpful and kind to them because they're bad at color guard. They're on your team, so being mean to them actually hurts your outcome, right? So it's really important they understand that ability to share kindness. Third layer of this, though, so we are expressing the kindness ourselves. We are teaching our students and membership to be kind to each other and to their staff and their captains. The third piece is teach your organization. This includes your staff, right? Because we know color guard, it can be a little petty. Teach your organization to pay this kindness forward. Be kind to every team you encounter, volunteers, show staff, coaches, parents, audience members, everyone around. It costs you and your membership nothing to be kind to people. And in doing so, you can actually make someone's day better. You can make people proud of your organization. You can develop and maintain a solid reputation for your school or your program, right? Like, these things are pretty simple, but it does take building a habit of kindness and not being mean or sniping or saying, hurtful things or talking poorly about another team or person. Those, sharing that mentality 24/7, right? Like I said, it goes 3 layers. I come in kind. I come in as nice as I can be all the time, whether I've had a bad day or not. I try to always be kind. I also try to reinforce the kindness within my own organization. Stop being jerks to each other. Don't get snappy because it's 6 a.m. I get it. We're tired. We have to remain kind. And then pushing that outward on the 3rd layer to the public is, you have to always show that kindness. Any questions on this section before I go ahead and move into how we apply this? It's kind of like I said, I'm gonna move a little bit quicker. I want to make sure we cover all of the content, but these, I think, are the ways we can create meaningful interactions and relationships inside and out of our organization. Okay, moving on to next slide here. Oh, maybe. Consistency is key. Okay. Consistency is key. This applies to your color card life. This applies to your work life. This applies to your personal habit forming and chore doing life, right? All those things that we as humans try to do better and try to do and repeat. Consistency is key. We know that when you're trying to build good habits, that repetition is what helps form those. So consistency. Number 1, accountability, transparency, and consistency. These 3 things kind of go together to me because that transparency piece is something I always try to operate with my organizations. I don't keep secrets from the members. I don't have a "you can't know why we made that decision" kind of mentality. Anybody wants to see the budget, come see it. Anybody wants to know why I decided something goes in the contract or not, come ask me. Anybody wants to know what those are, any of those details or whys, or why did you make a decision for so-and-so to get the solo instead of me? Why did you put us in this costume? Anything. That transparency is key to your students having full trust that they are signed up for an organization that is in their best interest, right? And look, there's sometimes where that transparency may say, I wanted to do it that way because I wanted to do it that way. That is still transparency, right? Owning where you make decisions because they're your preference tells the students that that's exactly what happened. So they don't have to be misled or misguided in knowing how decisions are made in your organization. Accountability, right? Holding your students accountable for all the expectations you've laid out in the contract, verbally, as well as behaviorally on the floor. That accountability must be even-handed. You can't, we all have favorites. To say so would be to say we don't would be a lie. We develop favorite students. We develop pain in the butt students, but that's just part of coaching. The even-handed accountability application is crucial for your team's success. No matter how obnoxious one student may be or how resistant they may be to changing habits, you have to still hold them to the same accountability. This also goes for favoring, right? You want to really make sure that you're not favoring the students with A, the most talent, or B, the most popular personality on your team. It's crucial that you even-handed apply your rules, right? This doesn't mean you have to even-handedly offer opportunity. That's going to be skill-based, reward-based on their performance, as well as maybe their behavior, right? Sometimes things need to be taken away to enforce behavioral things. That said, make sure you're even-handedly applying these principles. If you've got rules, they are for everyone. Section 2 here: praise in public, correct in private. Okay. Now this is meant to be for when you actually need to give direct feedback to an individual. This is not meant to say you can't make your corrections on the floor, or, you do a rep and so is late to count 6. That's not what I mean here. Obviously, we're going to make corrections in public all the time as it relates to the color guard that they are doing. What I mean here is do all of your praise in public. If you have something good to say about a performer, make sure that their peers hear it too, right? Because that's going to further reinforce the the praise you're giving, because likely they're going to continue to receive that praise from their peers after you've made it. So it has more of an impact when you do these things publicly. I do also think it's important to praise members individually, privately, when they've done something that really just exceeded expectations, and letting them know you recognize that. Correcting in private, though, this is stuff that's, if you have behavioral issues with any of your performers, correct in private. Pull them aside with you and another staff member, or you and an administrator, or you and a team leader, and have a discussion about their behavior and how to correct these things in private. Don't do those types of corrections in front of everyone, because again, then their peers will reinforce that correction and maybe be hard on that team member, and that's not their position, that's yours, right? So I say praise in public, correct in private. Number 3, leadership must be the example. I find this is actually one of the most difficult to get consistent, right? It's that human element of our leaders. We have staff, we have team captains, and often these individuals, team captains and staff, are young, right? Young in age, young in experience, especially in Utah high schools. There's not a lot of high schools that have, giant staffs of 10 people that have, an abundance of experience. There's a lot of limited resources here, and you may find that you're churning staff pretty frequently. So it's the toughest piece, is getting all of your leadership to be aligned in how we approach this. But I do think it's one of the most important pieces, is that your leaders must drive the example. Your staff must be consistent, and you must show up to rehearsal in the same manner as you expect your students to. So if, like for me, if that means showered and fed, then I also must show up showered and fed. If that's, means if any other staff member is talking, you are not, well, then if any other staff member is talking, I am also not. Right? It's kind of these expectations you lay for your students, you have to lay and expect for yourself, but you also must be that shining beacon of an example of perfect behavior. Create a positive environment. You have to leave your outside drama out. The same way you ask your students, right? Let's say you had a terrible day at work, you got to come to rehearsal afterwards. You have to show up for your students. You can't show up with whatever your baggage is and bring that in, because then you can't expect them to do the same thing. Require, and I use the word require very specifically here. Require your staff and your student leaders to set the example, and make it clear to your student leaders and your staff that you do expect a higher standard from them. Right? Setting that as part of your expectations makes it clear that you will hold them accountable for that higher standard than the rest of the membership. If you and your leadership cannot demonstrate this consistency or the expectations you've laid out, how in the world could you expect that from your young performers? Okay, so leadership must be the example. Any questions on consistency is key? Okay, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I'll make sure to circle back here at the very end. Final slide here is building upon your foundation. So number 1, develop and retain your staff and members. This is tough, right? People have lives, people go on missions, people get good jobs, people switch color guard programs, people quit color guard. So it's really challenging to continue to retain and develop your staff. Some of the key ways you can, however, treat them with respect. Okay. Remember, your staff and your students, they are always looking for you, looking to you for ways to improve their coaching or their spinning abilities, right? They are always looking to you. So you have to be really respectful and consistent in the way you interact with them, that it's never disrespectful. It's never, you're not going to talk down to anybody and make them feel stupid, because that's not going to, and it's not going to be conducive to their growth. You have to remain patient when people make mistakes. Your captains, especially, because they're young, they're students, but your staff as well. Your staff is going to make mistakes. They're young. And again, they're looking to you to grow their coaching skills. So it's really important you maintain patience when anybody makes mistakes, and remember to correct in private. So if your staff makes a mistake in a rehearsal, don't call it out right there in front of the students, right? Do not have conflict with your staff or your captains in front of the team. Correcting in private is going to be significantly better for your overall culture, the environment, and the individual, right? Anytime I've gotten a correction or I've needed a correction in behavior at a job or in a color guard, it's a hell of a lot easier to digest when I'm pulled off to the side, I'm given the information from a leader, and it does not feel good when an organization's leader will put you on blast in front of everybody. I've had that version of things as well. It's probably part of why people don't maybe like the big shiny blue organization from California, is because they can be a little harsh over the mic. And I know that type of membership experience isn't everybody's favorite. It leaves a lot of people feeling devalued and disrespected. So correct in private. Number two, how to, let me back up. In addition to retaining your staff, one of the pieces that's crucial for retaining is you have to understand where are their weaknesses, where are their strengths, and are you helping guide them to resources or offering them resources for developing those weaknesses into strengths. Okay, so, I've got staff member A. Let's say staff member A has a problem with tempo. Well, I'm going to get staff member A a metronome. I'm going to make sure that they're using that metronome and reinforcing that metronome usage so that tempo is something they develop to be a strength. Okay, another example, maybe you've got a staff member who really just doesn't have their own tosses together, and they're going to have to teach tosses to your kids. Give them some coaching yourself, right? Pull them aside or network within the organization of the UCGC to find your coaches additional resources to train. There are independent programs. There are independent world programs outside of the state that a lot of Utah people have connections with. And fostering that growth, I can tell you, man, oh my gosh, fostering the growth of my students to develop them into my future coaches was one of the best things I ever did. And then furthering that development once they were my coaches, I had the dream team and my team never left me. I had the same staff for almost an entire decade. So it really is about making sure that you are genuinely invested in their development as well and not overseeing your staff only, right? You as the director need to be interested in the development of the staff as well as the students. Okay, now I feel like I can move on to this last one here. Oops, sorry. Allocating your budget for optimized member experience. This one can be tricky. This is where we kind of loop back to some of the, what do you buy for team gear? What do you buy for uniforms? And weighing the value of your big ticket items like your costumes, your floor, your designers, your silks, potentially your staff. It's really important. And let me be clear here. When I go into allocating my budget, what I have to do is weigh what is the value, not in dollars, but what is the value of this budget line item for the membership, right? So even though the floor is a huge ticket item, it's one of the biggest any color guard pays for. Most of these things go over $3,000 if you buy one new nowadays. Is that floor going to bring more value to the experience of my membership as their uniforms? Likely it's not. Okay, so I'm going to try and go cheaper on the floor as much as I possibly can. If that means I got to not print it this year or buy a used floor or paint it instead, I'll make that decision based on the fact that I don't have the ability to do both. Same for silks. When I look at silks, I go, okay, is this actually going to enhance the experience of my membership? No, it's not. But those costumes, or maybe putting a jacket or even a t-shirt, right? A t-shirt you can get printed for $8 per person. That value, I have to play the weigh it game. And I do this with all of my big ticket items every single season. And I decide, is it more important for me to spend a little bit more money to bring in an additional staff member who would really contribute to the experience? Or is it really important to me to have big, fancy, shiny silks or an extra silk in the show because that's what my creative brain wants? Right. And I have to weigh those two things. And I always would encourage you to make the decisions that are in your membership's best interest. Okay. Sometimes, however, that may mean that you're trying to provide the best floor and silk and costume because maybe the experience is very competitive driven. And so those objects may be more important to the membership experience than they would be in a different scenario. Does that make sense? Kind of understand what that? It's like I have to weigh it each time, and I can't tell you exactly How do you allocate your budget for a good membership experience? But when you go to approach your budget, I would encourage you to approach it with a membership experience as your priority, so that you make the decisions that in the long run, maybe they weren't the best for your competitive outcome, or for pleasing all of the parents, or for keeping everybody creatively happy. You may have designers or other staff members that don't get what they want because there's not budget for it, but it is not about them. At the end of the day, what we're doing is for the membership that we are coaching, right? And there are other organizations that's not what they're about. It's not about membership experience. It's about getting the gold medal at the top. And if that's your intent and that's your organization, lay that out in your expectations from the very beginning, that competitive mindset is the mindset you're taking on, so people know what to expect. That's not the type of organization I run. I love to compete, but it's never really the final goal. I've never told a group, oh, we have to get this number or this score or this position in placement. That's never our end goal. We obviously set goals for competitive success, but they aren't our primary driver. In any organization I try to work with, it's really about the individual member experience, and then the overall, did we make a good experience for the most? Right? For the most people we possibly could. You won't get it right every time. You are going to have members that don't have a good experience in your program or don't contribute to your team culture. It's important you identify those as well. How to allocate your time. Where do you spend your time? There's really three big sections, I think, that color guards spend their time. One, training, right? We go stand in a block, we do our drop spins, we train, we do dance class, we do tosses, whatever that is for you guys, training. Number two, rehearsing your show, right? There's a huge chunk of your time that you spend rehearsing your show and just on the floor doing set to set or doing chunks with music, or full run-throughs. And section three, team bonding, right? And let me be clear, when I talk about the time that we have, I'm talking about the time that's within your control. So like competitions kind of run on a schedule. You don't really get to have control of what happens within that time. But you do have your rehearsal time and the time with your students that you dictate. Are we training? Are we rehearsing the show? Or are we doing some team bonding? I think it's really important that you segment your calendars this way and determine what's going to be best for you, right? If you have a brand new team who's never interacted with each other, maybe spend a little more time team bonding early on, because you know that's going to bring them together. And that togetherness will be important for them to grow once you start coaching and training really hard, right? Or maybe once you start rehearsing your show. And so you may shift the spread of when I'm in A class, when I had an independent A color guard, we absolutely are in training 50% of our time, period. Training is key in A class, so training will be 50% of my rehearsal hours. As we moved up into open class, that absolutely shifted into more of a 30% of our time was spent training, and more of our time was spent rehearsing the show, right? We had a significantly higher demand in skill sets in an open class show, and that meant that we needed to really focus on specifically what was in the show. Granted, we trained for it. We have training for specific skill sets, but we spent most of our time actually rehearsing the show because the expectation of the training is a little bit higher. Team bonding, though, is something that I think each team has to evaluate based on the closeness of their group and what their goal is. Is your goal to foster that team bonding? Do you as a coach need to identify any problems in that group and try to get those out so that you bring your membership to be more cohesive? Or do you have a super strong team? You know, if you've got a group, maybe you've got a color guard of 18 people and maybe 10 of those are seniors. And so they are bonded. They have been doing this together for a little while. Maybe you don't need to, in your rehearsal time, focus on giving them time to bond, right? Like I said, that kind of born out of necessity meal breaks thing, that was a team bonding time. And so I have to count that into my percentage. Okay, we're going to take half an hour every Sunday to do meal time, but that's built into my team bonding percentage. And I always know that that sits around 20% of my time or 15% of my time later in the year. So allocating your time to take care of your membership is one of the ways that you can build on that foundation, right? Is knowing what to do when. As well as where are you spending your money in this foundation? Where are you spending your money to build on the foundation you've already laid from a cultural standpoint? because these things come typically later in the season, right? You maybe spend a little money in the first part of your year, but your big purchase items kind of happen in October, November, December, January for winter guard, and usually over the summer for fall band. So it's just really crucial that you understand how to focus those things on membership experience so that you do build on the cultural foundation of what you've outlined. Any questions? I'm a little bit of a rambler, so I took us basically right up to time, but we do have a couple of minutes for questions. And like I said, I'll be happy to share these documents with everybody later. One thing I want to note here, everything that I've shared with you guys today is just from my experience. It is by no means the rules or the laws or the best version of anything. These are just takeaways from my time coaching color guard and also working in the corporate world, is that the mastery, autonomy, and purpose, as we bring those things in, and if I were to circle back and say, check the map, did you visit all 3 destinations? If we go back and look through the different slides, and when you look through those notes, look at the different items and ask yourself, okay, Cory talked about all the little things. Well, what one is that? What is that? What does that equate to? Is it mastery? Is it autonomy? Is it purpose? Budget allocation, where does that apply, right? Some of these things you may have to stretch a little bit to understand. I might make a budget choice to get a certain reaction out of membership. Maybe we're buying fancy jackets this year, and that may give them purpose. So there's always some method to the madness of a choice. If I'm making a choice for my team that doesn't really directly contribute to a membership's mastery of their skill set, their autonomy and ability to make choices within their activity, or their purpose and their reason for being here, then sometimes I find that it's not necessary to do the thing that I think it is, if it doesn't apply to one of those. Maybe I thought it was a great idea. I start talking about it. I see it doesn't contribute to those things. I might have to just put that idea away for another day. As one of my groups is defined as a club by their school, how do we help them buy into the idea of a competitive team? Yeah, so this one's a little bit of a challenge because I think it's about building your culture internally at your administrative level, where I think you may be able to get a little bit of buy-in from your administration is I would talk to them about the experience that the members are having being part of this club. I would also talk about the benefits of competing and being in competitive environments. The UCGC is a really healthy, large organization. I would wager that every person in this room has made 1 or 2 of their very best friends for life from this activity. I can also say that my personal career, I wouldn't have it had I not been in the color guard world and gotten the job because of references from color guard friends. The contributions that color guard brings to the actual development of teenagers as it relates to being able to work in a group, being able to set high standards for yourself and hold yourself accountable to those standards because they contribute to the team. Kind of some of these principles of punctuality, respectfulness, and preparedness that we teach just inherently within the activity. I think often administrations don't know. They just don't know what they don't know. And so supporting what looks like, a hobby of flag spinners, they don't see that there's a whole ton of actual value to be had in putting a little bit of resources behind it and supporting it as an organization within their school. So I would maybe put together a little presentation for your administrators or for whoever's in charge of that decision that really outlines what you think is the value it would bring to add to your school.
Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a really good one, Lane. Groovy. Well, if you have additional questions after the fact, I'm going to go ahead and share these documents, the little PowerPoint, and then also my note format version. I'll just post those in the Discord. You're welcome to have them. You're welcome to share them. But if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to just @ me in one of those conversational channels on Discord. I'd be happy to jump in. You can also private message me. Mm-hmm. My program is also a club, but that is because we have multiple schools that come to us. So we have no way to directly connect to a single school without cutting off access to our members. Besides having admin help, what can we do? Davis Jr., I'm not sure quite I understand your question. Do you mind clarifying a little bit? I don't know what you mean by without cutting off access to your members.
go ahead and hop on the mic if you'd like.
I'd say you can just unmute and chat if you want.
Hi, y'all. Sorry. So, I'm the assistant director. Cindy's out, so I'm like filling in for her. So, if we connect to a single school, our like program membership will be like split in half between Farmington and like I think 2 schools. So right now we have 4 feeders. We
Okay.
would cut down to only 2, but like as of right now, Farmington's already had their addition, so we would lose like over half of the team that we just barely built if we were to like connect to a single school. And we just don't have enough programs in Davis County to really make sure that everyone that wants to be able to spin would be able to spin.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge. And one of the challenges you probably face, and I think this is everywhere in the world, right? Especially in communities that smaller states. Utah suffers from this, and a lot of the Midwest suffers from this. We just don't have a million coaches, so there's not a million programs, right? And there's not enough. There's not always enough school support or school district support for every school to have a program. I think that you have your challenge ahead of you for sure. And I think that the most important thing for you to prioritize is the students. Can we get programs for as many students as possible? So I appreciate that you're already looking at like, we don't want to go this direction because it will actually cut students off from having the opportunity. But I think it starts with recruiting coaches and making sure that if you have a need for an additional club or an additional program, either at a specific school or within a school district or combination of schools, I think it starts with coaches and making sure you have enough people to help offer that opportunity. And then once you have coaches who are willing to put in the time, whether volunteered or paid, I think that's when you go to start the fight for the additional support from the administration. Is you have people in place who are willing to do it. And they have to see that there's going to be people who will take that and run with it before they're willing to put any resources behind it. As an administrator, I'm not going to throw thousands of dollars at a brand new 18-year-old by themselves. That's just it's a tough reality, but it is reality. And so it's important that you find, maybe some people who have some experience that also have the ability to communicate with administrators in a way that they can get what they need out of them.
Okay, thank you so much, Cory. Yeah, we've been prioritizing just making sure that we have access for members.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's tough. And with the school districts, it can be really tough because there's different versions of no resources, right? Sometimes it's no money. Sometimes it's no space. Where can we go practice color guard? And I know there's schools that fight for, common rooms and rooms with pillars in them or low ceilings and all the different challenges. But what I would just say is unfortunately, and fortunately, you're not alone in that one. Every color guard in the world is fighting that one. And in fact, it's a big reason that Wasatch went away is just loss of facilities over and over and over kind of battered us.
Cory, really quick, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
So
good.
I really liked the thought about admin that you had, and I'll definitely bring that up. However, we can't change our status until next year. So I just wanted to ask, like, kind of on the team side of things, how can we help them buy into that competitive team idea?
Yeah. So one of the things you really could do, and it's challenging because if you're not going to be able to fully organize this year and kind of legitimize the organization as a competitive group, you have other options. There's a lot of groups in Utah that do family night style performances, right? Where they can go participate. It's not going to be competitive, but they can go participate in the larger portion of color guard. Look for those invitations or reach out to groups do those family night events and see if you can participate as well. Mm-hmm. Second, encourage your members to participate in the solo and ensemble stuff. Run one internally, do a little solo and ensemble inside, or divide them into groups of, hey, you got to be in groups of 4 and we're going to do our own competition. And, you can get creative with ways to kind of foster competitive spirit. However, it is going to be a challenge this year to get them to buy into competing next year. So I wouldn't focus on that as much as focusing on the let's grow our skills. Let's get really good at color guard. And the reason we want to get good is because look at what we can do if we get good. We can start to compete.
We're competing this year in 2025. The issue is that we're based down in Washington, Utah. So we're like 4 hours away from everybody. So we're trying to
really tough.
Yeah, it is. It's been difficult, but I think if I'm trying to figure out like sister guard stuff and I'm trying to figure out like ways that we can like really like get involved.
And I think I think Utah or Southern Utah University also has a program now. I would maybe reach out to them and just see, would they be willing to maybe put together an event for all of the smaller Southern Utah programs to come together,
Oh, that's
whether
a
that
good
be
idea.
kind of
Yeah.
ad hoc or fully organized. That might not be a bad idea. Is can you network with all the other directors and coaches in the southern portion of the state and come together for some sort of an event?
Right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
But I would reach out to the universities because they have a lot of weight with administrations.
Right. For sure. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so
You know what I
much.
mean? Like to say, hey,
Yeah.
we want to go to this organization, Utah Color Guard Circuit, or to say, hey, Southern Utah University is putting on a color guard event we'd like to attend. Like those in an administration's ears have very different weight.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
That was excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for being able to participate. If another question sneaks in the last minute, that's totally okay. But I want to thank you each for taking the time to participate in this webinar. This was the final of 3, and so final notes. Thank you so much, Cory, for participating in this webinar and sharing this knowledge. I think this is kind of really good things to look into because there is a number of different ways and strategies that we can take to kind of better our teams. And having this information is good because now we can figure out, all right, where do we need to put our resources? Where do we need to put our effort? Or, hey, where can we build the team up from the bottom? So thank you so much, Cory. We super appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That is it for the webinar today. Cory, unless you've got any final words, thank you all for attending.
Nope. Go do the good work.